I stared at the papers in Marcus's hand, my fingers trembling just enough to sell it. The courthouse hallway was cold, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. My husband, soon to be ex-husband, wore his reasonable man face, the one he practiced in the mirror, the one that had fooled me for 8 years. "Just sign it, Claire," he said softly, like he was doing me a favor. "You're only making this harder on yourself." Behind him, his mother dabbed at dry eyes with a Hermes handkerchief. His father checked his Rolex. And there, trying to look innocent in a cream blouse that I'd complimented her on just 6 months ago, stood Jessica, my former best friend, the woman who'd been sleeping with my husband in the bed I'd paid for. In my first life, I'd signed these papers. I'd stood in this exact hallway, mascara running, hands shaking with genuine fear, and I'd signed away everything I'd built. The coffee shop chain I'd started with my grandmother's inheritance, though intellectual property I'd developed, the house my parents had helped us buy. All of it gone, because Marcus's lawyer had cornered me without my attorney present, pressuring me with threats about dragging this through court and destroying my reputation. In my first life, I'd believed him when he said this settlement was fair. I'd signed, and I'd walked away with $50,000 and a Toyota Camry. They'd walked away with an empire worth $40 million. I'd died 3 years later, broke and alone, from pneumonia I couldn't afford to treat. I'd spent my final moments in a county hospital, watching news coverage of Marcus and Jessica's wedding at the Four Seasons, my coffee shops rebranded with her name on the awnings. But that was my first life. I woke up on the morning of my 28th birthday, exactly 6 years before that hallway, in the bed I shared with Marcus, his arm around my waist, his breath against my neck. For a moment, I thought I was still dying, that this was some cruel hallucination my oxygen-starved brain had conjured. Then I saw the date on my phone, March 15th, 2018. I was 34 years old in a 28-year-old body, and I knew everything. I knew that in 3 months, Marcus would hire Jessica as our marketing consultant. I knew that in 6 months, they'd start their affair at the company retreat in Sedona. I knew that his parents, Stephen and Diane Chen, would help them hide assets in offshore accounts and shell corporations. I knew that Marcus's attorney, Richard Vaughn, would use every dirty trick in the book to make sure I left the marriage with nothing. I knew that the coffee shop chain I was about to pour my inheritance into would become a multi-state phenomenon, and that Marcus would steal it from me while claiming he was the visionary who built it. But, most importantly, I knew exactly when and how they'd do it. That knowledge was my hidden edge, and I'd spent 6 years sharpening it into a weapon. "Claire?" Marcus's voice pulled me back to the present. "Are you listening? My lawyer needs to be in court in 20 minutes. Just sign the settlement." I looked up at him with wide, watery eyes. The wronged wife. The victim. I'd practiced this look in the mirror, too. I don't know if I should do this without my lawyer present," I whispered. Richard Vaughn, 56, silver-haired, with a smile like a shark in a suit, stepped forward. "Mrs. Chen, your lawyer has already reviewed these documents. This is just a formality. We're trying to save you the expense and emotional trauma of a prolonged court battle." "You're being very generous," Diane Chen added, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "given everything you put Marcus through." Everything I put him through. In my first life, that line had destroyed me. The gaslighting had been so complete, so thorough, that I'd actually believed I was the problem. That my dedication to building our business had somehow driven Marcus into another woman's arms. That wanting financial transparency in our marriage made me controlling. That asking him to spend one evening a week at home instead of working late made me needy. I'd apologized to them. I'd actually stood in this hallway and apologized for being betrayed. I let my voice break. This feels like I'm giving up everything we built together. "Everything Marcus built," Stephen corrected, his jaw tight. "You made coffee, Claire. Marcus turned it into an empire." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell him that I designed every menu, every store layout, every customer experience protocol, that I'd developed the proprietary roasting technique that made our coffee distinct, that I'd worked 90-hour weeks while Marcus played golf and fucked my best friend. Instead, I let a single tear roll down my cheek. "You're right," I whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm just emotional." Jessica made a small sound, barely suppressed triumph. In my first, life, I hadn't known she was there. Marcus had hidden her, kept her away from the legal proceedings. But this time, I'd asked him to bring her. I'd played the desperate, delusional wife who still hoped we could work things out, who wanted to face my demons. Really, I needed her here to witness this. I needed them all to witness this. "Where do I sign?" I asked softly. Richard flipped through the pages, pointing to the signature lines with his Mont Blanc pen. I took it with shaking hands, the hands of a woman who didn't know she was signing away her life. But my hands weren't shaking from fear. They were shaking from the effort of not smiling. Because at 9:47 that morning, 7 hours and 13 minutes ago, my attorney, Vivian Torres, had filed a counterclaim in the New York Supreme Court that would destroy them all. I signed the first page, the settlement agreement that gave Marcus full ownership of Clairvoyant Coffee, the company I'd named after myself, ironically. That transferred the house to him. That waived my right to spousal support. That accepted $50,000 as full and final settlement of all marital assets. I signed the second page, the non-disclosure agreement that prohibited me from discussing the circumstances of the marriage or its dissolution. I signed the third page, the liability waiver that released Marcus, his family, and his business entities from any future claims. "There," I said, handing the papers back to Richard. My voice was small, defeated. "It's done." Marcus actually had the audacity to pull me into a hug. "You're doing the right thing," he murmured into my hair. "This way we can both move on with our lives. No hard feelings." Over his shoulder, I saw Jessica smile. Diane checked her phone. Stephen was already walking toward the elevator. They thought they'd won. They thought I was the same naive, trusting Claire who'd let them destroy her the first time. "No hard feelings," I echoed. Richard tucked the settlement into his briefcase with the satisfaction of a man who'd just billed $8,000 for 45 minutes of work. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mrs. Chen, or should I say, Ms. Morrison?" He chuckled at his own joke. I smiled weakly. "I'll keep Chen for now. Too much paperwork to change everything back." "Well, the settlement is executed," Richard said. "We'll file it with the court this afternoon. You should receive your funds within 30 days. "Actually," I said quietly, "you won't be filing anything." Marcus pulled back from the hug, confusion flickering across his face. "What?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. My hands were steady now. No more trembling, no more tears. "This is a copy of the counterclaim I filed this morning at 9:47 a.m. My attorney, Vivian Torres of Torres and Associates, submitted it to Judge Patricia Hammond's chambers along with a motion for emergency relief." I handed the envelope to Richard. He opened it, his face going pale as he read the first page. "What is this?" Marcus demanded. "Claire, what did you do?" "I'm divorcing you," I said calmly. "But unlike you, I'm doing it legally. My counterclaim includes detailed allegations of fraud, embezzlement, asset concealment, and civil RICO violations. It names you, your parents, Richard, and Jessica as defendants." "This is insane," Diane sputtered. "Richard, this can't be legal. She just signed the settlement." "The settlement you coerced her into signing without her attorney present," said a voice behind me. Vivian Torres emerged from the elevator, 6 feet tall in Jimmy Choos, her black hair pulled into a severe bun, carrying a litigation bag that probably cost more than the settlement they'd offered me. She was 53 years old, had never lost a divorce case, and had a reputation for absolutely demolishing men who tried to hide assets from their wives. In my first life, I'd never met her. I'd used a general practice attorney who'd been overwhelmed by Richard's aggressive tactics. This time, I'd spent 3 weeks researching divorce attorneys before my rebirth knowledge had even begun to matter. I'd interviewed Vivian 6 months ago, the day after Marcus hired Jessica. I'd retained her services with a wire transfer from my personal account, the one Marcus didn't know existed, funded with freelance consulting work I'd done on the side. "Vivian Torres," she said, extending her hand to Richard. "I believe we've met. Henderson, Reese and Henderson, 2019. You represented the husband who tried to hide $18 million in cryptocurrency. I got my client 82% of the marital estate plus sanctions against you for discovery violations." Richard's face went from pale to gray. "This settlement is void," Vivian continued, her voice pleasant and absolutely deadly. It was obtained through coercion, without opposing counsel present, and in violation of the automatic stay on side. See? Asset transfers that went into effect the moment I filed our counterclaim. Any assets transferred under this agreement after 9:47 a.m. today will be considered fraudulent conveyance. You can't do this, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Claire, be reasonable. I'm being very reasonable, I said. I'm following the law, which is more than I can say for you. I opened the envelope and pulled out the first exhibit, a photograph of Marcus and Jessica in bed, time-stamped 14 months ago. Then another and another. I'd hired a private investigator 3 days after my rebirth, and he'd been worth every penny. Adultery, I said, placing the photos on the hallway bench, documented across 18 months in our marital home, in hotels charged to our joint credit card, and in the clairvoyant corporate apartment. Jessica made a strangled sound. I pulled out the next exhibit. Bank statements, wire transfers, offshore account records. Embezzlement, I continued. Marcus, you transferred $8.4 million from Clairvoyant Coffee to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands called SC Holdings. Stephen Chen is the registered agent. The money was moved in increments small enough to avoid triggering reporting requirements, but large enough to constitute grand larceny. Stephen's face had gone purple. You're insane, he hissed. Those were legitimate business expenses. For a company that has no employees, no office, and no business purpose except to hide marital assets from me, I don't think so. I pulled out another exhibit. I also have documentation of the real estate holdings you purchased through SC Holdings, 3 properties in the Bahamas, a condo in Miami, and my personal favorite, the beach house in Malibu that you gave to Jessica. Jessica had gone white. How did I find out? I smiled. I'm very thorough. I've spent the last 6 years being thorough. Every business trip Marcus took, I knew about. Every late night at the office, I documented. Every dollar he stole from the company we built together, I traced. This is harassment, Richard blustered. I'll have your license for this, Torres. Try it, Vivian said coolly. I've CC'd the New York State Bar Association on every filing. Unlike you, Richard, I don't suborn perjury or help clients commit fraud. Speaking of which, she pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. That's the email you sent to Marcus last month, advising him on how to minimize his wife's discovery of liquid assets. The email you sent from your personal Gmail account because you knew it was unethical. Richard looked like he might vomit. I've also filed a separate complaint against you with the disciplinary committee, Vivian added, complete with documentation of your pattern of misconduct in cases involving asset concealment. You should probably get your own lawyer. The elevator dinged. 2 people stepped out, a man and a woman, both in conservative suits, both carrying badges. Marcus Chen, the man said. I'm Agent David Park, FBI. This is Agent Lisa Rodriguez. We need you to come with us to answer some questions about potential wire fraud and money laundering. The hallway went silent. Marcus looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. And I saw the exact moment he realized he'd never actually known me at all. The FBI, he whispered. Claire, what did you do? I reported the crimes I discovered during my investigation into our marital assets, I said calmly. When I found evidence that you'd transferred funds across state lines to conceal them from me, I had a legal obligation to report it. The fact that those transfers also violated federal banking laws is really just a happy coincidence. You vindictive bitch, Diane started. Mrs. Chen, Agent Rodriguez said sharply, I'd advise you to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Against me? Diane's voice climbed an octave. I haven't done anything. You're the registered agent for SC Holdings, I said. You signed the incorporation documents. You accepted the wire transfers. You're an accessory. Agent Park turned to me. Ms. Morrison, we'll need you to come to our office to give a formal statement. Your attorney mentioned you have additional documentation. 6 years' worth, I confirmed. Organized by date and cross-referenced by transaction type, I've also created a digital index with searchable tags. Everything's on a secure server, and my attorney has the access codes. Vivian smiled. It was not a nice smile. My client has been very cooperative with federal investigators. We expect the same courtesy from the U.S. Attorney's Office regarding any potential charges related to her receipt of marital funds. Given that she's the reporting party and victim of the fraud, I don't anticipate any issues, Agent Park said. Mr. Chen, we're going to need you to come, with us voluntarily, or we can do this with a warrant. I want my lawyer, Marcus said. Everyone looked at Richard. Richard looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. I'll need to check for conflicts of interest, he stammered. This situation is complex. What he means, Vivian said pleasantly, is that he can't represent you because he's likely to be called as a witness against you. Also, he's probably going to be disbarred within the next 6 months. Richard's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went even grayer. I need to take this. He walked away, phone pressed to his ear, and I heard him say, Yes, I received the notice from the disciplinary committee. Marcus stood in the hallway, surrounded by FBI agents, his parents, his mistress, and his crumbling empire. He looked at me with something between hatred and disbelief. Why? He asked. Why go to all this trouble? You could have just moved on. I thought about my first life, the hospital bed, the smell of disinfectant and death, the TV in the corner showing his wedding to Jessica, my coffee shops in the background, my legacy erased. In another life, I did just move on, I said quietly, and it killed me. His brow furrowed. Confusion, not comprehension. He would never understand what I meant. That was fine. He didn't need to understand. He just needed to lose. Mr. Chen, Agent Park said, we really need to go. Marcus let them lead him to the elevator. Stephen and Diane followed, Diane already on the phone with someone, probably trying to find a criminal defense attorney. Jessica stood frozen in the hallway, mascara starting to run, the cream blouse rumpled. You're named in the suit too, I told her conversationally. Alienation of affection, tortious interference with contract. And since Marcus gave you that Malibu beach house with money he embezzled from our company, you're also going to be dealing with some interesting questions about your own tax filings. Claire, please, she whispered. You never meant to get caught, I corrected. There's a difference. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and ran for the stairs, heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. The hallway was empty except for me and Vivian. Well, Vivian said, tucking her phone back into her bag, that went better than expected. I thought Stephen might actually take a swing at you. He wanted to, I said, but he's too aware of witnesses. Smart man. Stupid criminal, but smart enough to know when he's beaten. She checked her watch. Judge Hammond wants to see us in chambers at 4. She's already granted the temporary restraining order on all marital assets. Marcus can't touch a penny without court approval. What about the business? I've got a forensic accountant going through the books as we speak. Given what you've provided, I expect we'll be able to prove that Clairvoyant Coffee was built primarily through your intellectual property, your initial capital investment, and your labor. The fact that Marcus put his name on the corporate documents doesn't change the underlying ownership interest. How long will this take? 6 months to a year for the divorce. The criminal charges will take longer, but they're not our problem. Our problem is getting you every penny you're owed, plus punitive damages, plus sanctions against the other side for misconduct. What are we looking at? Realistically? Vivian smiled. The nice smile this time, the one she reserved for her clients. The company's currently valued at $42 million. We're going to argue for 90%, given your contributions and his misconduct. I think we can settle for 80, plus the house, which is worth about $3 million, plus your portion of his retirement accounts, stock options, and other marital assets, plus the beach house he gave to Jessica, which we're going to claw back as a fraudulent transfer, plus attorney's fees, which I'm going to make sure Richard personally pays as a sanction for his misconduct. So, conservatively, 35 to 40 million. If we go to trial and the jury hates him as much as I think they will, could be 50. $50 million. In my first life, I died with $17 in my checking account. There's one more thing, I said, pulling a flash drive from my purse. Marcus has been systematically violating health and safety codes at the Clairvoyant locations. Expired ingredients, broken refrigeration, falsified inspection reports. I documented everything. Vivian took the flash drive, her expression thoughtful. You want to bury him. I want to make sure he can never do this to anyone else. Fair enough. I'll pass this to the health department. Anonymously, of course. We walked to the elevator together. My phone buzzed, a news alert. Tech entrepreneur Marcus Chen questioned by FBI in financial fraud investigation. That was fast. Someone tipped off the press, Vivian noted. Wasn't me, I said innocently. Of course not. She pressed the button for the ground floor. Although if someone had hypothetically wanted to ensure maximum public awareness of Marcus Chen's legal troubles, thereby tanking his ability to secure investors or loans during the divorce proceedings, tipping off a journalist would be a hypothetically smart move. Hypothetically, I agreed. The elevator descended. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and warm. Spring in New York. Everything blooming, everything new. What are you going to do now? Vivian asked. I have a meeting with a headhunter at 6. I'm starting a new coffee company. Conflict of interest with Clairvoyant? Not if I'm about to own Clairvoyant. Besides, this is different. Specialty roasting, direct trade, sustainability focus. I've already secured initial funding from 3 investors who are very interested in backing a woman-led venture, especially after they heard about my situation. You've been busy? I've had 6 years to plan, I said. We stepped out onto the courthouse steps. Across the street, a news van was pulling up. A reporter was already setting up, probably hoping to catch Marcus leaving with the FBI. 6 years, Vivian repeated thoughtfully. That's a very specific timeline. I looked at her. She looked back, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. I'm very good at what I do, she said carefully, because I pay attention to details. And one detail I've noticed is that you knew things you shouldn't have been able to know. Bank account numbers that were never disclosed to you, passwords to encrypted files, the exact timing of transactions. You've been, she paused, choosing her words, unusually well prepared. My heart rate kicked up. In all my planning, I'd never considered that my preparation might itself be suspicious. I'm observant, I said. You're more than observant. You're prescient. She tilted her head. I'm not asking you to explain. Frankly, I don't care how you got the information. It's all legally obtained through discovery now. But I want you to know that I've noticed. And I respect it. Whatever you did, however you did it, you played the long game better than anyone I've ever seen. That takes patience, discipline, and a kind of cold clarity that most people don't have. She handed me her card, even though I already had it. If you ever need anything else, legal advice, a reference, someone to testify that you're the most detail-oriented client I've ever had, you call me. Thank you. Don't thank me. You did this yourself. I just filed the paperwork. She checked her phone. I need to get back to the office. We have a lot of discovery to process. Try to enjoy the rest of your day, Claire. You've earned it. She walked away, heels clicking on the pavement, her litigation bag swinging at her side. I stood on the courthouse steps and watched. The news van disgorged its crew. The reporter was young, eager, already practicing her opening line. Behind me, the courthouse where tech entrepreneur Marcus Chen. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? Ms. Morrison? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit. No relation to Marcus Chen, she added with a dry chuckle. I understand you've been cooperating with the FBI regarding potential financial crimes. I'd like to discuss some additional evidence we've uncovered in relation to the Clairvoyant Coffee Corporation. Of course. When would you like to meet? Are you available now? I'm actually at the courthouse on another matter. I could come to you. I'll be at the Coffee Bean on Center Street, I said. The one across from the courthouse. See you in 10 minutes. I hung up and started walking. The Coffee Bean was a small, independent shop, the kind of place that made me fall in love with coffee in the first place. I'd spent hours here during my first life, crying over spreadsheets, trying to figure out how to save the business I was losing. The owner, an older woman named Ruth, had given me free refills and quiet sympathy. This time, I walked in with my head high. Ruth was behind the counter, gray hair in a braid, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up and smiled. Claire, I haven't seen you in weeks. The usual? Please, and whatever Detective Chen orders when she gets here, put it on my tab. Ruth raised an eyebrow. Detective? Long story. I'll tell you later. I sat at a table by the window and watched the courthouse across the street. A crowd was gathering, more news vans, photographers, people with cameras. Someone had created a live stream, judging by the ring lights and professional microphone setup. Marcus was about to become very famous, just not the way he'd planned. Detective Chen arrived exactly 10 minutes later. Mid-40s, no-nonsense expression, NYPD shield on, her belt. She ordered a black coffee and joined me at the table. "Thanks for meeting on short notice," she said. "I've been reviewing the documentation you provided to the FBI, and I have some follow-up questions." "Ask away." She pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of transactions. These wire transfers from Clairvoyant Coffee to SC Holdings. Some of them were routed through intermediary accounts. Did you have any knowledge of these accounts during your marriage? No, I discovered them during the divorce investigation. But you knew to look for them? I knew Marcus was hiding money. I hired professionals to find it. Very good professionals. She swiped through more screens. We've identified at least 37 separate accounts that Marcus Chen used to move money. Some of them are over 5 years old. The sophistication of this scheme suggests either professional assistance or someone who's very smart and very motivated, I finished. Marcus is both. We're also looking at potential tax fraud. If these funds were never reported to the IRS, we're talking about hundreds of thousands in unpaid taxes. Maybe millions. I filed accurate tax returns every year, I said carefully, based on the information Marcus provided to me. If he lied on those returns, that's on him. Legally, you could still be liable, which is why my attorney has already filed for innocent spouse relief and provided documentation that I had no knowledge of the fraudulent returns. We've also prepared amended returns for every year in question, with full disclosure of the newly discovered income. Detective Chen smiled slightly. You've thought of everything. I've tried. The health code violations you reported, we've already sent inspectors to 6 Clairvoyant locations. We found significant issues. Expired dairy products, rodent droppings in the storage areas, refrigeration units that haven't been serviced in years. Did you know about these conditions? I suspected. I wasn't involved in day-to-day operations for the past 2 years. Marcus pushed me out of the business after he hired Jessica. The woman he was having an affair with. Yes. Who is now facing her own legal issues related to the beach house. So I've heard. Detective Chen closed her tablet. Off the record, I've been doing financial crimes for 20 years. I've never seen anyone build a case like this. You've got bank records, photographs, emails, text messages, witness statements, forensic accounting, digital forensics. It's like you've been preparing for trial for years. I met her eyes. I have been preparing, just not for trial. For what then? For this moment, right here, where I get to sit in a coffee shop, drinking good coffee, knowing that the man who destroyed me is about to lose everything. She studied me for a long moment. He must have hurt you badly, in another life, I said quietly. He killed me. Detective Chen didn't ask what I meant. Maybe she thought it was metaphorical. Maybe she didn't care. She stood, tucking the tablet into her bag. We'll be in touch as the investigation continues. Try to enjoy the rest of your day, Ms. Morrison. That's the second time someone's told me that. Then maybe you should listen. She smiled. And if you ever need a reference for how cooperative you've been with law enforcement, you let me know. After she left, I sat alone in the coffee shop, watching the circus unfold across the street. Marcus was being led out of the courthouse now, FBI agents on either side, cameras flashing. He had his jacket over his head, the classic perp walk pose. Ruth came over with a fresh cup of coffee and a chocolate croissant. On the house, she said. You look like you're celebrating. I am. The guy in the handcuffs, that's your husband, isn't it? I recognize him from the photos in the business section. Soon-to-be ex-husband. Good riddance? She sat down. Across from me, uninvited, but welcome. I remember when you used to come in here. Back when you first started Clairvoyant. You were so excited about your business plan, your roasting techniques. You'd talk for hours about the perfect espresso pull. I was naive. You were passionate. There's a difference. She gestured toward the courthouse. What happened? He stole it. Everything I built. And when I tried to fight back, he almost destroyed me. Almost? Almost, I agreed. So what now? Are you going to take back your company? Better than that. I'm going to take it, restructure it, and turn it into what it should have been all along. No more cutting corners, no more profit over quality, and definitely no more Marcus. Ruth laughed. I'll drink to that. We clinked coffee cups. My phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. Judge Hammond approved the emergency motion. All clairvoyant accounts are frozen. Marcus can't pay his legal bills. This is going to be fun. Another text. This one from an unknown number. Hi, Claire. This is Amanda Jo from Forbes. I'm writing a story about women entrepreneurs who've been victimized by their business partners. Would you be interested in an interview? And another. Claire Morrison, this is Jake Chen from TechCrunch. We're covering the Marcus Chen fraud case. Sources say you built most of Clairvoyant's IP. Would you like to comment? The story was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. Good. I wanted everyone to know what Marcus had done. I wanted investors to flee. I wanted customers to boycott. I wanted his name to become synonymous with fraud and betrayal. But more than that, I wanted them to know the truth. That Clairvoyant Coffee, the brand, the experience, the quality, had never been Marcus's vision. It had always been mine. I texted Vivian. Forbes and TechCrunch want interviews? Should I? Her response was immediate. Absolutely. Control the narrative. I'll draft talking points. Within an hour, I had interview requests from 6 major publications. By the evening, the hashtag #ClairvoyantTruth was trending on Twitter. Someone had dug up old photos of me from the early days of the company, back when I was the face of the brand, before Marcus had pushed me into the background. Whatever happened to Claire? One tweet asked. She was brilliant. The coffee was better when she was in charge. Marcus Chen took credit for his wife's work and then cheated on her. Another replied, tale as old as time. The next morning, I woke up to a call from my new investors. Claire, have you seen the news? It was David Huang, one of the 3 venture capitalists backing my new coffee venture. You're everywhere. I've seen it. This is incredible publicity. Our fund wants to double our investment. We want to position your new company as the ethical alternative to Clairvoyant. I appreciate that, but I need to be careful about disparaging Clairvoyant publicly. I'm about to own it. Even better. Listen, we think you should do a TED Talk. How I rebuilt my life after my partner stole my business. Something empowering. The timing is perfect. Let me think about it. Don't think too long. Strike while the iron's hot. After I hung up, I made myself breakfast. Avocado toast, fresh fruit, the good coffee I'd been buying from a small roaster in Portland. In my first life, I'd eaten ramen and store-brand cereal for months after the divorce, rationing my settlement money while I tried to find work. This time, I was getting $50 million. This time, I was the story. My phone rang again. This time, it was Jessica. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. Hello? Claire? Her voice was shaky, tearful. Please, you have to drop the lawsuit. I can't afford an attorney. They're saying I might go to jail. You accepted a house that was purchased with embezzled funds. What did you think would happen? I didn't? No. Marcus said it was a gift, a bonus for my work. You were sleeping with him, Jessica. You knew exactly what it was. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything, but I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. You meant to fuck my husband in my bed, I said flatly. You meant to help him steal my company. You meant to erase me from the business I built. The only thing you didn't mean was to get caught. Claire, please. You're named in a civil suit, Jessica. My attorney is the best in the state. And I have documentation of every lie you told, every asset you helped Marcus hide, every time you pretended to be my friend while you were destroying my life. I paused. But I'll tell you what. If you cooperate fully with the investigation, if you testify against Marcus and his parents, if you return every penny you got from him, I'll consider reducing the damages against you personally. I'll do it. Whatever you need, I'll do it. Vivian Torres will be in touch with the terms. And Jessica? Yes? Don't ever contact me again. I hung up. 2 days later, Jessica's attorney reached out to Vivian with a cooperation agreement. She was willing to testify that Marcus had explicitly told her he was hiding assets from me, that Stephen Chen had helped set up the offshore accounts, that Diane had advised them on how to avoid triggering automatic reporting requirements. In exchange, we agreed to cap her liability at $500,000, Still enough to hurt, not enough to destroy her completely. She's going to lose everything anyway, Vivian explained. The beach house is being seized. Her reputation is destroyed. No one in the business world will touch her. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone live with the consequences of their choices. What about Marcus? Marcus is going to prison. The U.S. attorney filed formal charges yesterday. Wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. He's looking at 10 to 15 years. And the civil case? We're negotiating a settlement. His new attorney, not Richard, who's been suspended pending his disciplinary hearing, wants to avoid a trial. They're offering you $35 million plus the house and full ownership of Clairvoyant. What are we asking for? $50 million, the house, Clairvoyant, and a public apology. He'll never apologize. Then we'll go to trial. And I'll make him wish he had. The settlement negotiations took 6 weeks. Marcus's attorney tried every angle, arguing that I'd trapped Marcus, that I'd been spying on him illegally, that my evidence was tainted. But every argument fell apart under scrutiny. My private investigator had followed all legal protocols. My documentation was impeccable, and the FBI's independent investigation had confirmed everything I'd found. Finally, Marcus's attorney called Vivian with a new offer. $45 million, the house, 80% ownership of Clairvoyant, no apology. Not good enough, Vivian said. My client is going to prison. He won't have access to these funds anyway. You're just being vindictive at this point. My client is entitled to vindication. $50 million or we see you in court. Fine, $50 million, but the apology is off the table. Then we'll get it from a jury. 3 days before trial, Marcus broke. His attorney called at 11 p.m. We accept your terms. $50 million, the house, full ownership of Clairvoyant, and a written apology to be published in the New York Times. We also want it read in open court, Vivian said. You're destroying him. He destroyed himself. We're just making sure everyone knows about it. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I wore a navy suit, professional, composed, victorious. Marcus wore an orange jumpsuit. He'd been denied bail after trying to flee to a country without an extradition treaty. Judge Hammond called the case. Marcus's attorney stood. Your Honor, the parties have reached a settlement. My client is prepared to transfer all assets as outlined in the agreement. He's also prepared to make a statement for the record. Mr. Chen, Judge Hammond said, please rise. Marcus stood. He looked like he'd aged 10 years and 6 weeks. His hair was greasy, his face drawn. The cocky entrepreneur was gone. What remained was a broken man who'd finally realized he couldn't charm or manipulate his way out of consequences. He pulled out a piece of paper, the apology Vivian and I had drafted. I, Marcus Chen, he read, his voice hollow, admit that I defrauded my wife, Claire Morrison, of her rightful share in the business she founded and built. I acknowledge that Clairvoyant Coffee was her vision, her intellectual property, and her life's work. I stole her ideas, her money, and her future. I betrayed her trust in the worst possible way. I am deeply sorry for the pain I caused, and I accept full responsibility for my actions. The courtroom was silent. Further acknowledge, he continued, that Claire Morrison is the rightful owner of Clairvoyant Coffee, and that any success the company achieved was due to her talent, her dedication, and her innovation. I have agreed to transfer all my interests in the company to her, along with the financial compensation outlined in our settlement agreement. I hope that she can rebuild what I destroyed, and that the public will support her as the true creator of the Clairvoyant brand. He folded the paper. His hands were shaking. Judge Hammond looked at me. Ms. Morrison, do you accept this settlement? I stood. I do, Your Honor. Then the settlement is entered into the record. Mr. Chen, you are ordered to comply with all terms within 30 days. This case is closed. The gavel came down. It was over. Outside the courthouse, the same news crews that had filmed Marcus's perp walk were waiting for me. But this time, they weren't looking for scandal. They were looking for a success story. Ms. Morrison, what are your plans for Clairvoyant Coffee? Ms. Morrison, is it true you're starting a second coffee company? Ms. Morrison, what message do you have for women entrepreneurs who've been victimized by their partners? I stopped at the microphones. Clairvoyant Coffee was always meant to be more than just a business, I said. It was meant to be a community, a place where people could connect over quality coffee, sustainably sourced, ethically produced. My ex-husband lost sight of that vision when he prioritized profit over people. I'm going to return the company to its roots. We're going to reestablish direct trade relationships with our farmers. We're going to renovate our locations to meet the highest health and safety standards. And we're going to be transparent about every aspect of our business, from bean to cup. What about your new venture? I'm launching Rebirth Coffee in the fall. It's going to be a premium roasting company focused on small batch, single origin beans. All of our profits will be split 50-50 between the farmers who grow our coffee and a foundation I'm establishing to support women entrepreneurs who've been victimized by business fraud. Why Rebirth? I smiled. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. And when you come back from that, you come back stronger. The interview clips went viral. By the end of the week, I had 300,000 followers on Instagram. By the end of the month, I'd been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, and Entrepreneur magazine. The New York Times ran a full-page profile. Claire Morrison, the woman who rebuilt an empire. Clairvoyant's stock price, which had tanked when Marcus was arrested, started to recover as soon as I announced my plans for the company. Customers who'd boycotted during the scandal started coming back. Employees who'd quit in protest asked to be rehired. I brought on a new management team, people I trusted, people who shared my values. I fired everyone who'd been loyal to Marcus, including the CFO who'd helped him cook the books. The health code violations were fixed within 2 weeks. The offshore accounts were closed and the funds repatriated. The shell corporations were dissolved. Clairvoyant Coffee became, for the first time, exactly what I'd always wanted it to be. 6 months after the settlement, I opened the first Rebirth Coffee location in Brooklyn. It was small, just 12 seats, a pour-over bar, and a roasting room visible through a glass wall. The design was minimalist, sustainable, beautiful. Ruth from the Coffee Bean came to the opening. "You did it," she said, looking around at the polished concrete floors, the living wall of plants, the carefully curated music. "This is perfect." "It's a start," I said. "What's next?" "I'm opening 3 more locations next year, and I'm in talks with a publisher about a book." "What kind of book?" "A business memoir. How to build a company, lose everything, and take it all back." She laughed. "That's going to be a bestseller." "I hope so. I want other women to know that it's possible to rebuild. That you're not defined by what someone takes from you. You're defined by what you do next." A year after the settlement, Marcus was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Stephen and Diane each got 5 years for their role in the fraud. Richard was disbarred and ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution. Jessica declared bankruptcy. I didn't attend any of the sentencings. I was too busy running 2 coffee companies, writing my book, and planning a speaking tour, but I did watch the news coverage. And I did feel a deep, satisfying sense of closure when the judge read Marcus's sentence. "Mr. Chen," the judge said, "you betrayed the person who trusted you most. You stole not just money, but dreams, effort, and years of someone's life. Your actions were calculated, deliberate, and cruel." The sentence I'm imposing reflects the severity of your crimes and the profound harm you caused. 12 years. Marcus would be 53 when he got out. I would be 47. And I would be running a coffee empire worth over $100 million. 2 years after the settlement, my book hit the New York Times bestseller list. Rebirth, How I Reclaimed My Life, My Business, and My Power, debuted at number 3 and climbed to number 1 within 3 weeks. The reviews were incredible. "A masterclass in resilience and strategic thinking," said Publishers Weekly. "Morrison's story is both heartbreaking and inspiring," wrote the Times. "Her methodical approach to rebuilding her life will resonate with anyone who's ever felt powerless." The speaking tour sold out in every city. I talked to audiences of thousands, mostly women, mostly entrepreneurs, all of them hungry for the message that they could overcome betrayal and injustice. I told them about my first life, though I framed it as a thought experiment. "Imagine," I would say, "that you could go back in time knowing everything you know now. What would you do differently? How would you protect yourself? How would you ensure that the people who hurt you could never do it again?" The audiences would lean forward, rapt. "You can't actually travel in time," I'd continue, "but you can learn from your mistakes. You can document everything. You can build relationships with the right attorneys, accountants, and advisors. You can make yourself financially literate. You can refuse to be the trusting, naive person who gets taken advantage of. And if someone does betray you, a woman asked at one event, then you destroy them, I said simply. Legally, ethically, but thoroughly. You don't let them get away with it. You fight back with every tool at your disposal. And you win. The audience erupted in applause. After the event, dozens of women came up to me with their own stories. Husbands who'd stolen their businesses, partners who'd hidden assets, family members who'd exploited their trust. I listened to every story. I gave them Vivian's card. I told them about resources, support groups, legal aid organizations. You're not alone, I told them, and you're not powerless. 3 years after the settlement, Clairvoyant Coffee was valued at $180 million. Rebirth Coffee had 20 locations and was expanding internationally. I'd paid off my parents' mortgage, established a scholarship fund for women business students, and donated millions to organizations that fought financial fraud. I'd also started dating. His name was Daniel, and he was a professor of economics at Columbia. He had no interest in coffee, no business connections to my world, and absolutely no tolerance for dishonesty. "What attracted you to me?" he asked one night over dinner. "You're boring," I said. He laughed. "Thanks. I mean it. You're stable, predictable. You don't play games. You say what you mean. After everything I've been through, boring is incredibly sexy." "Well, when you put it that way." He reached across the table and took my hand. "For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary. Not because of the empire you've built, though that's impressive, but because of how you've refused to let what happened to you make you bitter or small. You could have taken your settlement and disappeared. Instead, you turned your pain into something that helps other people." "I had good motivation," I said. "Revenge?" "Justice," I corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Revenge is about hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is about making sure they can't hurt anyone else. And which one did you get? I thought about Marcus in his prison cell, about Richard, disbarred and unemployable, about Jessica, bankrupt and working as a barista at a chain coffee shop in New Jersey, about Stephen and Diane, their reputation destroyed, their assets seized, their son in prison. "Both," I said. "I got both." 4 years after the settlement, I sold Clairvoyant Coffee to a consortium of investors for $220 million. I kept Rebirth Coffee. The sale made headlines. Claire Morrison exits the company she fought to reclaim. But the real story was in the terms of the sale. I'd negotiated protections for the employees, guaranteed wages, benefits, no layoffs for 5 years. I'd required the new owners to maintain the ethical sourcing standards I'd established, and I'd kept veto power over any major changes to the brand. "Why sell?" a reporter asked. "Because it's not mine anymore," I said. "It was mine when I created it. It was mine when I fought to get it back. But now it's something bigger than me. It's a brand, a legacy, a community, and I'd rather see it continue to grow than try to control it forever. What will you do now?" "Focus on Rebirth. Write another book. Maybe start a venture capital fund for women-owned businesses." I smiled. I'm 42 years old. I have a lot of time left. 5 years after the settlement, I received a letter. It was from Marcus. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity, again, won. "Claire," it began. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you. Prison has given me a lot of time to think, a lot of time to regret." I skipped ahead. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted to say that you were right. About everything. Clairvoyant was your vision, your work, your dream. I took it because I was insecure and greedy and afraid that I'd never amount to anything on my own. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. I hear you're doing well. That makes me happy. You deserved success. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I hope you found peace." It was signed simply, Marcus. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and never looked at it again. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his regret. I had something better. I had my life back. 6 years after the settlement, on the anniversary of my rebirth, I threw a party. Not a fancy event, just close friends, good wine, and excellent coffee from Rebirth's newest blend, a medium roast from a women-owned cooperative in Colombia. Daniel was there, of course. We'd been married for a year. Vivian came, still fierce and brilliant at 59. Ruth from the Coffee Bean, my parents, a handful of employees who'd stuck with me through everything. A toast, Vivian said, raising her glass, to Claire, who taught us all that sometimes the best revenge is living well. To justice, I corrected, raising my own glass. And second chances. To second chances, everyone echoed. As I sipped my wine, I thought about my first life, the hospital bed, the crushing defeat, the way I'd given up on myself, that Claire was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who would never again let anyone take what was hers. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked, slipping his arm around my waist. How different things could have been, I said. Regrets? Not a single one. And I meant it. Because yes, I'd suffered in my first life. I'd died alone and broken. But that death had given me the knowledge I needed to rebuild, to fight back, to win. I'd been given a second chance, and I'd made it count. That was all that mattered. The party wound down around midnight. People hugged me, congratulated me again, promised to get together soon. When everyone was gone except Daniel and me, I walked to the window and looked out at the New York skyline. Somewhere out there, in a federal prison, Marcus was sleeping in a cell. Somewhere out there, Jessica was probably lying awake, worrying about money. Somewhere out there, Richard was trying to rebuild a career that would never recover. And here I was, in a penthouse apartment I'd bought with my own money, running companies I'd built with my own hands, living a life I'd fought for with everything I had. You won, Daniel said softly, joining me at the window. I did, I agreed. Was it worth it? I thought about the 6 years of planning, the calculated risks, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, the fear that I'd miscalculated, that they'd win again, that my rebirth had been for nothing. Every second, I said, because winning wasn't just about the money or the company or the public vindication. Winning was about looking at my reflection and seeing someone I respected. Winning was about going to sleep without regret. Winning was about knowing that I'd stood up for myself when it mattered most. And most importantly, winning was about making sure that the people who'd tried to destroy me had failed. They'd failed completely, spectacularly, permanently. That was worth everything. Come to bed, Daniel said, taking my hand. In a minute. I stayed at the window a little longer, watching the city lights. In my first life, I died at 34. In this life, at 43, I was just getting started. And I had no intention of stopping. Not now, not ever, because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. When someone takes everything from you, you don't just rebuild. You rise higher than they ever imagined possible. You become someone they can't touch, can't hurt, can't diminish. You become unstoppable. And then, when they're broken and forgotten, you get to stand in the light they tried to steal and shine brighter than ever before. That was my revenge. That was my justice. That was my rebirth. And it was absolutely, perfectly, magnificently worth it. 7 years after the settlement, I was invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship conference in San Francisco. The keynote slot, primetime, audience of 5,000. I almost said no. I'd been cutting back on speaking engagements, focusing more on the venture capital fund I'd started, but the organizer was persistent. Claire, you're an icon. These women need to hear your story. So I said yes. The auditorium was packed. I stood backstage, listening to my introduction, feeling the familiar pre-speech nerves. She lost everything and took it all back. She turned betrayal into a business empire. She's living proof that resilience and strategic thinking can overcome any obstacle. Please welcome Claire Morrison. The applause was thunderous. I walked onto the stage, and for a moment, I was overwhelmed by the sight of all those faces. Women of every age, every background, all looking at me with hope and expectation. I thought about the woman I'd been in my first life. Broken, defeated, dying. and I thought about the woman I was now. Strong, successful, unstoppable. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. "I'm going to tell you a story. It's going to sound impossible, but every word of it is true." I told them about Marcus, about the betrayal, about signing away my life in a hallway, but I didn't tell them about the rebirth. Not directly. Instead, I framed it as a question. What if you could go back and do it differently? What if you had another chance? What would you change? The audience was silent, listening. "You can't actually go back in time," I said, "but you can make different choices starting right now. You can protect yourself. You can document everything. You can refuse to be taken advantage of. You can fight back." "And if you've already been betrayed?" someone shouted from the audience. I smiled. "Then you destroy them," I said. "Legally, ethically, but completely." The applause started again, building into a standing ovation. After the speech, the line of women waiting to talk to me stretched across the entire conference hall. Each one had a story. Each one needed advice. I stayed for 4 hours until the venue staff had to ask us to leave. As I was walking to my car, a young woman, maybe 25, caught up to me. "Ms. Morrison, I'm sorry. I know you've been talking to people all day, but I have to ask." "Ask," I said. "How did you know? How did you know exactly what to do, when to do it, what evidence to gather? It's like you had a playbook." I looked at her, really looked at her. She had the same desperate, haunted expression I'd had in my first life. "I did have a playbook," I said. "I wrote it myself. Every mistake I could have made, I thought through in advance. Every trap they could set, I anticipated. Every move they made, I was 3 steps ahead." "But how?" "Because I treated my divorce like a war," I said simply. "And I made sure I won." She nodded slowly. "I'm going through something similar. My partner, he's been stealing from our company. I have proof, but I'm scared." "Don't be scared," I said. "Be strategic. Document everything. Find the best attorney you can afford. And when you're ready, strike hard and strike first." "Like you did. Like I did." I gave her my card. "Email me. I'll connect you with Vivian Torres. She's still the best divorce attorney in New York." "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." As I drove back to my hotel, I thought about all the women I'd helped over the years. The ones who'd emailed me after reading my book. The ones who'd approached me at conferences. The ones who'd joined support groups I'd funded. Each one of them was fighting their own battle against betrayal. And each one of them deserved to win. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my hotel room, looking out at the San Francisco skyline, and I made a decision. I was going to write another book. Not a memoir this time. A guide. A literal playbook for women going through divorce or business betrayal. How to protect yourself, gather evidence, and win. I started outlining it that night. By morning, I had 30 pages of notes. Within 6 months, I had a complete manuscript. Within a year, it was published. And within 2 years, it had sold over 1 million copies. Women's rights organizations used it as a training manual. Attorneys recommended it to their clients. Therapists gave it to patients going through divorce. It became the book I wished had existed when I needed it. The book that could have saved me in my first life. 8 years after the settlement, I received an email from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Inmate Marcus Chen has requested permission to contact you. Per federal regulations, you have the right to approve or deny this request. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I clicked deny. I didn't need his apologies or explanations. I didn't need closure from him. I'd found closure on my own terms. 9 years after the settlement, Clairvoyant Coffee, now owned by the Investment Consortium, opened its 500th location. The new CEO invited me to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "We couldn't have gotten here without your foundation," she said. "The ethical sourcing, the employee protections, the community focus, that's all your legacy." "It's your company now," I said. "You've done incredible things with it." "But it started with you, and we want to honor that." She unveiled a plaque inside the new location. Clairvoyant Coffee was founded by Claire Morrison, whose vision, innovation, and dedication created a company that values people as much as profit. This legacy continues in every cup we serve. I stood in front of that plaque and cried. Not from sadness, from pride. Because this company, this community, this impact was mine. Marcus had tried to erase me. He'd failed. 10 years after the settlement, I was 45 years old. Marcus was being released from prison, having served 10 of his 12 years with good behavior. I didn't think about him much anymore. When I did, it was with a kind of distant curiosity, like wondering about a stranger's life. But his release made the news. Disgraced entrepreneur Marcus Chen released from federal prison. The article included an interview. He looked old, worn, hollow. "I made terrible mistakes," he told the reporter. "I hurt people who trusted me. I destroyed my own life out of greed and arrogance. I'll be paying for those mistakes for the rest of my life." "What are your plans now?" "I'm going to try to rebuild. Find a job, make amends where I can. I know I can never undo what I did, but I can try to be better." "Have you reached out to your ex-wife, Claire Morrison?" "I've tried. She's made it clear she doesn't want contact. I respect that. She's built an incredible life without me. I'm proud of her for that, even though I have no right to be." I closed the article. He was right about one thing. He had no right to be proud of me. But I was proud of me, and that was all that mattered. That same week, Daniel and I found out I was pregnant. "Are you happy?" he asked, his hand on my stomach. "I'm terrified," I admitted, and excited, and grateful, and about 100 other things. "You're going to be an amazing mother." "I hope so. In my first life, I'd never had children. I died alone, with nothing and no one. In this life, I was building a family. I was creating a legacy that had nothing to do with coffee or business or revenge. I was creating life." 11 years after the settlement, I gave birth to a daughter. We named her Hope because that's what my second chance had given me. Hope that things could be different. Hope that I could build something beautiful out of pain. Hope that justice was possible. As I held her in my arms, looking down at her tiny, perfect face, I made her a promise. "I will teach you to be strong, to stand up for yourself, to never let anyone diminish you. And if someone tries to take what's yours, I'll teach you how to fight back and win." Daniel laughed softly. "She's 1 day old, Claire." "It's never too early to start planning," I said, because I'd learned that lesson the hard way. Planning, strategy, preparation. Those were the tools that had saved me. Those were the tools I'd pass on to my daughter. 12 years after the settlement, Rebirth Coffee was valued at $400 million. I'd turned it into more than just a coffee company. It was a platform for social change, supporting women farmers, fighting labor exploitation, promoting sustainability. We'd opened locations in 12 countries. We'd employed thousands of people. We'd changed lives. And I'd done it without compromising my values, without cutting corners, without betraying anyone's trust. I'd proven that you could be successful and ethical, that you could win and be good. That was the real victory, not the money, not the empire, the knowledge that I'd built something that made the world better. 13 years after the settlement, I was invited to the White House. The president was hosting a summit on women's entrepreneurship, and I was one of the featured speakers. I stood in the East Room, looking out at an audience that included senators, CEOs, and activists. And I told my story one more time. 13 years ago, I said, I signed away my life in a courthouse hallway. I gave up everything I'd built because I was scared and alone, and I didn't know I had options. But I got a second chance. Not everyone gets that, so I've made it my mission to make sure other women know they have options, that they don't have to accept betrayal or abuse or theft, that they can fight back, that they can win. The First Lady herself approached me afterward. "Your story is remarkable," she said. "What you've built, not just the businesses, but the support systems, the advocacy, it's changing lives. That's the goal," I said. "Keep doing it. We need more women like you." I drove back to my hotel thinking about that conversation. Women like me. Women who refused to stay down. Women who turned their pain into power. Women who won. 14 years after the settlement, I sold Rebirth Coffee for $650 million. But I didn't retire. Instead, I used the money to create the Morrison Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting women who'd been victimized by business fraud or domestic financial abuse. We provided legal funding, expert witnesses, forensic accountants, emotional support, everything I'd needed and barely found in my own fight. Everything I wished had existed when I needed it. Within the first year, we'd helped over 300 women. Within 3 years, we'd helped thousands, and every single one of them won their cases. Because I'd created a system that worked, a system based on everything I'd learned from my own experience. 15 years after the settlement, I was 50 years old. My daughter was 4 years old, brilliant and fierce and completely fearless. Daniel and I were happy. My parents were healthy, my businesses were thriving. And Marcus was working as a manager at a Target in Ohio, living in a studio apartment, paying restitution for the rest of his life. He'd tried to rebuild, but his name was poison in the business world. No one would hire him. No one would invest in him. No one would trust him. He would never recover. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even pity, just nothing. He was irrelevant to my life now. He'd been a problem I'd solved, a chapter I'd closed, a lesson I'd learned. That was all. 16 years after the settlement, I was invited to give the commencement speech at Harvard Business School. I stood at that podium, looking out at hundreds of bright, ambitious young people, and I wondered which of them would betray and which would be betrayed. You're about to enter a world that rewards aggression and cunning, I told them. A world where people will try to take credit for your work, steal your ideas, and diminish your contributions. Some of you will be the ones doing the taking. Some of you will be the ones being taken from. If you're going to be successful, you need to decide right now which one you'll be. Will you be the person who builds or the person who steals? The person who lifts others up or tears them down? The person who creates value or extracts it? I'm here to tell you that you can be wildly successful without being cruel. You can be strategic without being unethical. You can win without destroying others. But I'm also here to tell you that if someone tries to destroy you, you fight back. You document everything, you build your case, you strike when you're ready, and you win. Don't be a victim, don't be a villain, be smart, be prepared, be unstoppable. The graduates gave me a standing ovation. 17 years after the settlement, I wrote my third book, The Art of Strategic Revenge: How to Win Without Compromising Your Integrity. It was part business strategy, part legal guide, part psychological analysis. It became required reading in business ethics classes at major universities. Because what I'd done, what I'd accomplished, wasn't just about me. It was about showing that justice was possible, that victims could become victors, that power could be reclaimed. 18 years after the settlement, I was invited to speak at the United Nations. The topic was economic justice for women. I stood before representatives from 193 countries and told them what I'd learned. Women lose trillions of dollars globally to financial abuse, business fraud, and discriminatory legal systems. We need better laws, better enforcement, better support systems. But we also need to teach women to protect themselves, to be financially literate, to document everything, to fight back when they're wronged. Justice shouldn't depend on whether you can afford a good lawyer. It should be accessible to everyone. My speech led to the creation of an international treaty on financial fraud in marriage and business partnerships. 47 countries signed it within the first year. 19 years after the settlement, I was 54 years old. I'd built 3 successful companies, I'd written 3 best-selling books, I'd helped thousands of women win their own battles, I'd changed laws in multiple countries, I'd raised a daughter who was growing into a force of nature. And I'd done it all because I'd been given a second chance, because I'd woken up on my 28th birthday with the knowledge of how my first life would end, and I'd decided to write a different story. 20 years after the settlement, on the anniversary of my rebirth, I hosted another party. This one was bigger. Family, friends, colleagues, the women I'd helped, the people I'd mentored. My daughter, now 9 years old, stood next to me as I raised my glass. 20 years ago today, I said, I made a choice. I chose to fight instead of surrender, to plan instead of panic, to win instead of lose. That choice changed my life. But more importantly, it changed a lot of other lives too. The women in this room who refused to be victims. The laws that were changed. The systems that were reformed. So this toast isn't just to me. It's to everyone who's ever stood up to injustice. Everyone who's ever fought back against betrayal. Everyone who's ever refused to accept defeat. To justice, I said. To victory, they responded. And to second chances. We drank, and I looked around the room at all the lives I'd touched, all the victories I'd helped achieve, all the good I'd been able to do because I'd refused to stay down. In my first life, I died at 34 with nothing. In this life, at 54, I had everything. And the only difference was knowledge and choice. I'd known what would happen if I did nothing, so I'd chosen to do everything. That was the power of a second chance. That was the power of strategic thinking. That was the power of refusing to be a victim. As the party wound down and my daughter fell asleep on the couch, Daniel and I stood together, watching our guests leave. "Any regrets?" he asked. I thought about the question seriously. Regrets about Marcus? No. Regrets about the years of planning and preparation? No. Regrets about the ruthlessness it took to win? No. Not a single one, I said. I did what I had to do, and I'd do it all again, even knowing how hard it would be. Especially knowing how hard it would be, because now I know it was worth it. He kissed my forehead. "You're remarkable." "I'm strategic," I corrected, and I was motivated. "By revenge?" "By justice," I said, and by the knowledge that if I didn't fight back, he would do it to someone else. Maybe he still did in my first life. Maybe there were other women he destroyed, but in this life, I made sure he couldn't hurt anyone. "You saved more than just yourself." "That's what I tell myself," I said. Went to bed shortly after. I lay awake for a while, thinking about my journey. From the dying woman in the hospital bed to the powerful entrepreneur hosting parties. From the victim signing away her life to the victor who'd reclaimed it all. From the naive wife who trusted too much to the strategic fighter who'd planned every move. I'd become someone I barely recognized from my first life. Someone stronger, someone smarter, someone unstoppable. And I'd done it by refusing to accept the story that had been written for me. I'd rewritten it. Every single word. That was my revenge. That was my justice. That was my rebirth. And it was absolutely, perfectly, magnificently worth every single moment. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't just living well. It's living so well that your enemy's destruction becomes a footnote in your success story. Marcus Chen tried to erase me. Instead, I erased him. And I built a legacy that will outlast us both. That's winning. That's justice. That's everything.